Good afternoon and welcome to the University of Manchester Career Service Meet the Professional event, where we have invited some of our alumni along who undertook a placement year as part of their degree. So this is really hopefully going to be a helpful session for you if you are thinking about undertaking a placement as part of your degree. You have the opportunity to ask our panel questions about their own experiences and hopefully get some tips and advice. This session is being recorded. You are all on mute at the moment, but you can communicate with the panel and myself via the questions tab. So on the right hand side there, you should have the option to contact us via questions. So please submit your questions in writing through there. I do have Jenny with me, Jenny Sloan, who's behind the scenes. She's also my colleague in the careers team. So Jenny will be picking up those messages. And once you submit those, I'll be submitting those to the panel. So if there's any questions you want to know about how they've applied, how they went about sort of searching for opportunities, or even if you want to ask a little bit about the companies that they're working for, I've put the details on the screen there so you can see which companies the alumni are working at. But I will start off now by inviting our alumni just to come and do an introduction, say hello. So if you can just pop your cameras on where you can and your audio. Just to let the audience know, we have had a couple of technical issues this morning in terms of webcams. So all of our panelists have got audio, thankfully, but two of them unfortunately haven't got their cameras working. So you will be able to hear them. There are images, hopefully you can see on the screen there. So please feel free to kind of sort of submit your questions through the questions tab. Okay, so we'll start off with Jessica, if that's okay. Jessica, would you mind just sort of introducing yourself and tell us what degree you did, what placement you did with which company, and just a little bit about what you're doing now? That'd be great.
Perfect, thanks Penny. Hello everyone, my name's Jessica. I studied chemical engineering at Manchester. I did a master's there as well, also in chemical engineering. And whilst there, I did an industrial placement with Cargill. I worked at their Liverpool site at the rapeseed crush and refinery. I was there for 1 year and really good experience. And since then, I'm now working for 3M. I started on their graduate scheme and have since moved into the role of application engineer for their closure and masking system division. It really is a bit of an in-between role, the sort of technical between the sales guys and the manufacturing side.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jessica. Along to you, Samuel, if that's okay.
Hey guys, yeah, that's fine. So my name's Sam. Nice to meet everyone on the call. My degree was biology. So I graduated just over a year ago now. But I did a placement year at Unilever as well, which is where I'm currently working. So my placement year was a bit of a shift away from biology, and I fancied trying my hand at IT. So ended up working alongside our ice cream division during our placement year. So that was very fun and lots of free ice cream, which was a positive. And then from there, I obtained a place on the Unilever Future Leaders program, which is the graduate program that Unilever runs across the world, but that's a 3-year program that I'm in at the moment. I'm attached to the information technology department, but move jobs every 6 months effectively. So my current role is something called enterprise architecture and specifically focusing on e-commerce opportunities. So how we sell our products online and direct to the consumer, which is you guys. So enjoying it, learning a lot, but enjoying it. So I think that's me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sam. Andy, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Andy. I graduated this year and I studied psychology. I've done a placement with a charity called Turning Point, where I worked as a support worker, which was helping people who were struggling with substance misuse. And I worked in 3 of their services. So I worked in the detox centre, a rehab centre, and also a community service centre. And currently I'm doing a master's at UCL studying clinical mental health sciences. And alongside my studies, I'm doing a placement as an honorary assistant psychologist. So yeah.
Wow, that sounds like a really busy year.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much, Andy. And then last but not least, Imogen, please.
Hi, yeah, I'm Imi. So I graduated in 2018, I think it was. And I did my placement year after my second year at uni, and I worked at a startup called Voyage Control, which is like an air traffic control, but for trucks. So we have a scheduling platform for vehicles arriving at construction sites, into convention centres and at port terminals. And it's been a wild ride from the very, very early startup stage to where we are now, which is kind of the scaling side of things. I've been promoted a couple of times. I've been there for 4 years now. So started off as an account manager and ended up head of customer success. I think that was the start of this year. And it's been amazing. It's kind of crazy. Startup life is definitely very different, I think, to the corporate, but it's been very fun. And I'm looking forward to chatting to you guys a bit more about that.
That's great. Thanks so much for that, Amy. Really appreciate that. And thank you to all the panelists for introducing yourselves. So one of the questions that we want to start off with is just a little bit about if you can go back in time and just try to remember when you were in that place looking for opportunities and you're starting that journey to kind of apply and search. What would you say was one of the kind of biggest challenges that you had to overcome? So if it's okay, Andy, could I start with you?
So was the question, what's the biggest challenge of me securing the placement?
Yes, please. Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, for me with psychology, it's quite competitive. So they usually don't want to like hire anyone who hasn't graduated, or if you don't have like a lot of voluntary experience. So luckily for me, I did have prior voluntary experience. So for instance, I worked with Nightline, which is the university service to help students. So you do get a few rejections in that sense, because they're like, well, you haven't got a degree yet, so we don't really want you. But luckily in the interviews I did get, by just doing a lot of research on the company and just showing like how much I knew so far from my degree, I think that just really helped. So yeah, that's quite psychology, like, yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important to highlight. It's incredibly competitive, and actually trying to get experience before you even start applying for placement year opportunities is really key. So thanks for sharing that. Imi, what about your biggest challenge in kind of overcoming that sort of challenge when you were looking for opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually didn't start at Voyage Control. I started at a renewable energy brokerage, which was based in Kent, and that was an even smaller startup. And the reason I ended up in startups was essentially because I applied to loads and loads of corporate companies, and I just found that whole process really difficult. So I decided, okay, I still definitely wanted to do the placement year, but I was like, maybe there's a reason I'm not getting into corporate things. You know, I think you're right in terms of the experience side of things. Everywhere wants experience, but it's very difficult to get that. Luckily, I'd had a few years of sort of part-time work and things, which I think is always useful to have on the side. But yeah, I think I pivoted into the startup side of things just because I was like, this is a lot easier. You know, there's a website called Angel List, which I'd recommend for anyone that's looking to go into startups. And the easiest way to describe it is kind of like a Tinder, but for work. So you have like these profiles up there, and they match you and you match them. And if you both match, it starts a conversation. And that's how I ended up in Voyage Control. And the process was so much quicker, and it wasn't like the assessment centres or anything like that. It was a lot more straightforward. But I really empathise with people that are going through the application process, because it's very tough. But I think, you know, just keep trying and you'll get something, or, you know, you can pivot into startup life like me.
And I think that's really important, isn't it, Imi, that kind of adaptability. So if, you know, one particular route isn't working for you, think about, you know, what other ways you can reach out to employers and make those connections and offer your services, if you like. So that's really great that you shared that. Thank you. Jessica, how about you? Sort of, what was the biggest challenge you had to overcome when you were looking for a placement or starting that journey?
I think the competition side of things that's being mentioned is so important across all the placements. You really need to stand out against everybody else, and why should that employer hire you? With my experience, I was actually quite lucky because at the time Cargill specifically liked University of Manchester, and so they only actually hired from University of Manchester across, I think there was 3 or 4 different manufacturing plants. So I was quite lucky to be in a smaller pool of applicants. But I think it's what you said, Imi, there, having part-time experience, or if you've done work that's not related to your placement, but it's still experience you can draw on. You'll have learned teamwork and management and time management or organization. So I think it's really pulling your experiences into what the recruiter is asking for, so how you can draw in on those. And like I said, at the time I was quite lucky because they came directly to University of Manchester. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but
Yeah, actually, just to pick up on that, Jessica, we are the most targeted university in the UK by graduate employers. And obviously a lot of those graduate employers do offer placement year opportunities with a view, you know, to offering graduate roles. So yes, that is still the case. We are still very much targeted by those big employers, one of which Cargill is. Thank you for sharing that, Jessica. And then Sam, how about you in terms of your challenge that you had to overcome?
So I think my biggest challenge, to be honest, was probably not knowing what type of placement to do. So I kind of landed in the placement scheme a bit by accident, to be honest. I remember turning up to a tutorial and my tutor sort of said, you know, how many people are doing placements? And out of 7 people in the tutorial, everyone raised their hand but me. So it was a bit of a shock for me to kind of think that, you know, like this is something that maybe I should focus on, and that's when I swapped over to the scheme. But I wasn't in love with biology, to be honest with you, in my first couple of years, and a lot of the placement opportunities in that space were lab-based or research-based, and to be honest with you, that wasn't really, I think, Imogen kind of mentioned, like, is there a reason that wasn't appealing to me? And I think it was. So I think the biggest challenge for me was kind of dismissing those opportunities and kind of thinking, you know, maybe aligning more with my purpose and, you know, what would I enjoy. And then I actually got an email, to be honest with you, from Unilever, and it was a generic sort of corporate placement scheme email, but it was something that I kind of took a bit of a punt on and thought, you know what, that sounds good. It was paid, which was again kind of an attractive thing for me. But then I started to kind of research the company a bit more, and the sustainability initiatives and stuff like that was something that appealed to me. I think the biggest challenge was, you know, really kind of, I think it's good to understand what you want to get out of a placement, and would totally recommend trying something new. I don't think it necessarily has to completely fall in line with your degree or your potential career path. I think I'm in IT now, and it was a completely different change to what I was used to, but it's something that I'm really glad that I went with. So I'd say that would be the challenge. Don't be afraid to try something new.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that. Just a quick question for all of you, actually. So how many roles did you apply for, and when did you start your search? So Jessica?
So as I mentioned, then Cargill came directly to the university, and actually they were one of the first people to come. So it was really quite early on that I applied, sort of September, October latest, and because I was lucky enough to secure the placement, I was able to stop applying. I would say that that was a great experience for me, but my graduate experience, I did have to do multiple applicants and it did take longer. So it's not, although I had a good experience with industrial placement, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will forever be easy. So if you do struggle to get a placement, hang in there, because I did have to learn that second time around. But for me, I started right at the very start of my second year in university in the September.
Brilliant, thank you. Imi, how many did you apply for and when did you start?
Or in terms of numbers, there was a lot of applications that went out. I'd say probably 15 to 20 corporate companies, but that might actually be a bad sign because maybe I didn't put as much effort into them as I should have. And then on the angel list side of things, probably a handful. And then I came across Voyage Control quite quickly after my 6 months at the energy company. And I started very early, actually. I think I figured out that I wanted to do the placement year early on in my second year. And I remember there being two sort of pools of applicants. I think there was one quite early on in the year where you could apply for placements, and then I think there was another opportunity a bit closer to the deadline. So I applied at both times. But again, biased because I'm coming from the startup side of things. There's not really a deadline when it comes to that. They're constantly looking for people to hire throughout the year, so it's a little bit less rushed on that side of things.
That's great, thank you. Sam, how about you? How many do you think you applied for approximately, and when did you start your search?
Yeah, so I think probably around 7 or 8, to be honest. I think out of those 7 or 8 applications, I think about 4 of them were really serious and something that I really wanted to pursue. So I think Amy mentioned a good point around the effort that you put into each application, and I think that does show by how much you progress. I probably ramped up the search after Christmas, I think, in second year. So January, February, March time was probably where those applications were really progressing. But I think, yeah, having experience now and maybe looking at the graduate side of this process, I think starting earlier is definitely better. Maybe that doesn't mean that you apply to everything straight away, but at least keeping an eye on what is available and what's out there as early as possible. Try and get an Excel together and just have a list. I think that really helps you make your decision.
That's great, thanks. Great advice there about keeping a record of what you've applied for using Excel. Top tip from Sam, brilliant. And Andy?
So I actually started quite late compared to everyone else. So I started in like March, because when I first started second year, I didn't actually want to do a placement, and it was just kind of, in a way, it was kind of randomly. I was like, do you know what, that would probably be a good idea for me to do one, and that was around about March. I did do a lot of research, but as I said previously, like a lot of them, the requirements, like you need a degree in order to get this placement. So there's a lot I would have applied for but didn't, because I knew I'd get rejected because I didn't meet the basic criteria anyway. But my course did help me look for other ones where you didn't necessarily have to have a degree. So with them, I applied for 2. One of them I got rejected from, and the other one is the one that I ended up getting. But I will say I did put a lot of effort into my application, which I got a lot of help from the career service with. So I was like constantly editing and then booking an appointment at the career service so they could read through it, and then I'll do it again. So I do think that's why I got quite lucky that with the second one I got it, because yeah, I put in a lot of effort in the application process.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that's another really important message there from Andy and a couple of the other panelists, that it's not necessarily about quantity, it is about quality, and if there is something there that you really want, do make sure you draft it, you redraft it, get some feedback, and make use of the kind of support that's available at the university. Thank you so much to everyone for feeding back on that. Okay, we've got a really interesting question here, and this comes up a lot actually. It's about time management. So the question is, how did you balance all your university work, your other commitments, alongside applying for these roles? How did you manage that? So any top tips from anyone? I'll just throw this open. Anyone want to answer that?
Unfortunately, I think getting up at a reasonable time helps open your day up. I know that I was guilty of it as a student. It's easy to lie in bed if you've not got a lecture until 11 o'clock to maybe stay in bed until that time. But really, if you do have a regular routine, and you know, it's not bad to get into a regular routine because otherwise your first week of work will hit you like a brick. I think if you do a 9 to 5 day, you actually don't need to, well, you shouldn't need to. If you're productive in your 9 to 5, it should be enough time to get through your work and to do the applications. If you scroll on Instagram or, you know, take a look elsewhere, maybe less so, but I do think getting up early is, and not the crack of dawn, but start work at 9 is a good tip.
Okay, great. The early bird catches the worm, is lovely, thank you. Anyone else want to chip in and give some advice around that, sort of managing that balance?
Sure. You go ahead, Sam.
You go.
Cheers. I'm kind of the opposite. So I work better in the evenings, which is good in some respects, but it also means you have to compromise a few nights out and parties and things, which is, in the long term, it's worth it. But yeah, I think little and often. I think just, you know, plow away at these things, and you know, when you feel inspired to do a bit of work, then you're probably going to do better work at those times. But it all comes down to, you know, how you work best anyway, which I'm sure you all have an idea of, you know, the times that you work best. I think as long as you commit, you know, small parts of your day to it, little and often, I think that's the way I tackled it.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Sam?
Yeah, so I guess this is something that was quite relevant for me. I was terrible at time management, and being totally transparent there. I went on too many nights out, to be honest, and you know, didn't do enough lectures. But one thing I started to do, which really helped, was I kind of treated, so I was based in the Stopford building, but they have a really nice library there. But I tried to start treating the libraries as an office. And I think, like Jessica said, trying to get that office mindset and that routine mindset into your you know, into your uni life, it is something that's invaluable. It definitely helped me in my final years at uni as well. So yeah, I think for if you're looking to apply for placements, you know, at least reserve maybe one day a week and treat the LEG, treat the library, you know, even if it's cafe, try and treat that like the office and have that office mindset. And I do think that does wonders for your productivity. So you should be able to fit it in if you have that mindset.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks. Andy, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'm the same as Jessica. Like, I want to wake up early and like get a lot of work done. I think one thing I'd probably add on is I would always do to-do lists every morning. Like, I knew what I needed to get done that day, so I'd always put time for uni work and put time in for applications, and they'd be very realistic. Like, I wouldn't set loads amount of work where I knew I wasn't going to finish it. But I think by having that, it just takes the stress off you a little bit. So just planning out your day. And I'm the same, like, I would make sure I go to the library and I would treat it as an office. So I'd go to the library early, I'd have a break for lunch and whatever, but then go back to the library and just get all of that work done. So yeah.
That's great, thank you so much. Okay, I've got a question here just for Andy. It says, can you repeat the name of the website you used to find a placement opportunity, please?
I think that was Imogen.
That's what I thought. I'm just going to check. I think it might have been Imogen, the Angel List, wasn't it?
Angel List, yeah.
Is it angellist.com or?
I think it's .co.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Okay, this one is for you, Imogen, as well. So how did your placement year set you up for graduate success with a startup? As you know, working for a startup is different than corporate. Did you develop any skills during your placement year that helped you as a graduate forging a career in a startup?
Great question. Yeah, so as I said, I started off in the energy company. After 6 months, we sort of realised they needed a experienced marketer, and I obviously, as an undergrad, was not an experienced marketer. So we sort of we parted ways, and I looked for this second placement and worked with Voyage Control. interestingly, I've stayed with them throughout. I went back to uni in my final year, continued to work for Voyage Control and do my dissertation and final year modules all at the same time, which again, I think was probably a bit of a balancing act of, you know, work in the day, uni at night, and compromising a little bit of my social life there. But I guess because I haven't really gone into the graduate pool and had to look for a corporate job, I can't comment on that side of things. But I do actually think that working in a startup is very, very beneficial. And whilst you won't necessarily have all of the same processes and softwares and things that you may have in a bigger company, I think it actually teaches you a lot more about how to deal with those inefficiencies and build those processes. And it also allows you to progress a lot quicker. So head of customer success, I don't know many people my age that have that same title. I think that's usually, you know, after 7 or 8 years of experience. And, you know, I was lucky that I went into a company that just believed in me. You know, they sent me to travel abroad and work abroad for them, represent them overseas. And they pushed me through. At the moment, I'm doing a small business leadership program with Brunel University as well. So that there's lots of opportunities out there. I think if you have a specific career or a specific company in mind that you want to work with after a startup, it's just figuring out what you need to do, what sort of skills and things you need to get there. But there's so many transferable things, and I think, you know, any experience is good experience. It teaches you a lot. It's usually just how you frame it, actually, and, you know, networking and making sure you chat to other people that are at the company that you really want to work at and figure out what selling points they would have for graduates, I guess. I think, yeah.
Thank you so much. That's really insightful, and certainly I know people that I've worked with that own startups, that run startups, and students that want to work for them. They almost talk about that they evolve with the business as it changes and kind of shapes itself. So I think that was echoed in what you were saying there, Amy, so that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
A question for Jessica. You mentioned that Cargill came to UOM looking for students to fill the placement opportunities. How did you make yourself stand out from the other candidates?
So I think if you haven't got things that you can talk about yet, I would start building on them. So I did have a part-time job. I was a volunteer leader at a scout group, and thinking of other slightly odd things, I did Duke of Edinburgh up to my Gold Award. So those are often things that I talk about at an interview, and I think there's something that I have an interest in and I'm happy to talk about. And I think that's important, because you don't need to have, I don't think you need to have a passion for the job, but you need to show that you can be passionate about something. And so it's the employer's job to unlock that potential once you get to the placement. So I think it's really important to come across quite genuine. I think if you're excited for the placement and willing to learn, then hopefully that will come across. But I will be honest, I definitely was a reserve candidate, because I know that the first bunch of people got offered their placement and I didn't hear anything, and then my friend actually said no thank you. So I was number 2 choice, but you know what, I was happy to go for the placement and happy to take that opportunity. So yeah, I think in an interview, try to come across genuine. Before the interview, try and put things that are of an interest to you, things that stand out slightly on your application form.
Brilliant, thank you. That's great. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jessica. Okay, I've got a question here for Samuel. Sam, your placement experience was in a different sector than the sector you're interested in. How did you make your placement opportunity relatable to your graduate job search? So the transferable skills that you've developed.
Yeah, so I mean, it was different, but it wasn't necessarily too different. So I think so my placement opportunity was still working for Unilever, and it was still in the consumer goods sector. It had more of a marketing element and more of a customer development direction than what I'm in now. I think for me, so I'm in basically tech management now. And maybe what people will start to realize is that tech is absolutely everywhere at the moment. So no matter what function you do, you'll have some element of tech support and tech innovation kind of in there. So on my placement year, we developed basically a big data and analytics platform. And it was, to be honest with you, a pure IT project, but it had the sort of customer development label on it because that's what we were using it for. So in honesty, my year was very relevant to what I do now, and I think that's because tech is such a big sector at the moment that it kind of is everywhere. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the exact question, but maybe it was just how things developed.
Brilliant, fantastic. Thanks so much for that, Sam. I have got another question for you, but I'll come back to you in a moment if that's okay. So this is one for everyone on the panel. It says, I know you can't be that picky, but what was the biggest thing you were looking in the companies where you were applying for your types of roles? So what was the main attraction? What were you looking for in those companies that made you end up applying? So it made you want to start off because you, as you said, you had a bit of an unusual journey. You started with one placement, but then changed. So what was it that attracted you to eventually working for a startup?
I think it was definitely the process of the application process was obviously a big thing for me at that point, because I was, a bit fed up with getting rejections and no feedback from bigger companies. So I figured it would be a little bit more simple. But I think also the potential for growth and the potential to sort of really take your role and run with it and make it and shape it into whatever you want it to be. The other huge thing for me was the travel aspect. And if you're in a smaller company and you've got a client that's in Australia but you haven't got staff there, then the likelihood is they're going to send someone on the team there. And luckily enough, that's what happened. And I've had a few stints doing that sort of thing, and that's hugely attractive to me. I like the sort of diversity in the role and the ability to shape it into what you're interested in.
Brilliant, thank you. And Andy, what about you? So sort of beyond the expertise that you were going to gain, what else attracted you to, I know you're on your masters at the moment, but what about the actual placement that you did?
Mine's kind of similar. There was a lot of diversity in the role. So as I said before, I wasn't in just one service. I was working in a rehab, I was working in a detox, and I was working in a community service. So I'd kind of change each week. So I got to experience a lot of different parts of working with people with substance misuse. So working with people who are still in the early stages of recovery, but also people who have already stopped using substances, but they're in rehab and trying to get their life kind of back to what we know as normal, I guess you can say. So I was happy with that because it kept me very engaged and I was constantly learning. And also I was very big on I wanted a lot of experience with clients. So a lot of the placements you might just be doing research in an office or something like that, but I like to have a lot of interaction with people. So that was something again that really drew me to the role.
Brilliant, thank you so much for that. Jessica, what about you with Cargill?
So Cargill still have a long-standing industrial placement scheme that's ran for a long time, so it is very well developed. And I think the benefits, now I know other people have had different experience maybe that says the opposite could be true, but actually the thing that I liked about the long-standing placement was the fact that the other employees there had experience with graduates, so there was a lot of support there, and they knew sort of at what level a lot of students come in at, where they can find their own way, but actually in your early 20s, first experience of full-time work, you do maybe need a bit more guidance than the average employee. So I thought that it was important to get some, for me, I only ever worked in retail previously, so I did want a bit more guidance and direction. And I think another good thing about Cargill for me was that they did have a graduate scheme. Now in the end, I actually didn't end up applying for it, but I knew that if if you go in somewhere that has both a graduate scheme and an industrial placement, hopefully you are, and I really enjoyed my experience with Cargill, but because I enjoyed it, I made a lot of friends. I didn't want to come back as a graduate with my serious hat on, so I thought that I took the industrial placement for what it was, learned a lot from them, but decided to be more serious and a bit more grown up elsewhere. But for me, the important thing was that support going into a new role, and where they have got a few systems in place. I know Amy has said that you can learn without them, but for me it was really beneficial to have that and to have that guidance.
Great, thank you. And Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I think echoing a lot of what Jessica said. So I think, yeah, in leadership that I think Unilever puts into this placement scheme, and how it would help me personally develop. I think that was a big objective for me as a placement year. I kind of wanted to mature, to be honest with you, and you know, learn new skills and learn what it's like to really be in that career type environment. So yeah, I think that was a big driver for me, was, you know, what could I do for the company, but what could they do for me as a person on a personal and a work level.
Right, fantastic. So another question for everyone here. Hopefully this will be quite a short answer. In terms of your first year grades, when you were applying for opportunities, did that have any impact? Were you disregarded because of those grades, or did that go in your favour? So maybe Sam, we could start off with you. First year grades?
No, so I was projected a 2-1 in first year, so that was pretty comfortable, I think, for most places that I was applying.
Great, fantastic. Jessica?
Same for me, also predicted a 2-1 in first year, so and I do think that was the criteria required for the application that I applied for.
Great, fantastic, thank you. Andy?
I don't think my grade had any impact on it, to be honest. They didn't seem to be that bothered. They were more bothered with the previous experience I had. But in terms of with psychology, you had to have at least had like a 2-2 in your first year. So it wasn't too bad, to be honest. But yeah, so in that sense, it didn't really matter.
Brilliant, thank you. And then Emmy?
Yeah, same as Sam and Jessica. It didn't really affect mine, I don't think. And I think I was also online for a 2-1.
Fantastic.
If you don't mind me adding 2 cents more, I would say that actually my grades dropped to a 2-2 in second year, but I already had the placement confirmed by that point. And whenever I got in touch with them, they didn't have a problem with me continuing the placement once I'd secured it. But to get the placement, that I was on track for the 2-1.
Right, thanks for that. Yeah. Okay, question for Sam here. You mentioned finding your purpose and understanding what we want to get out of the placement. What steps did you take to find your purpose?
Yeah, so I think honestly, I don't know my full purpose yet. I think that's something that you know, people can spend 40 years in careers and maybe not know what they like to do. But I think what I did was honestly break down elements of, I guess, maybe subjects I'd done at sixth form, kind of like what I did in my free time, and maybe why perhaps I chose biology as an interest, so as a degree. So I think I broke that down to the real kind of fundamental levels, and was like, you know what, I kind of like this whole idea of experimentation and trying new things, and kind of yeah, being on the cutting edge of I guess society and stuff like that, and really kind of pushing the boundaries. So yeah, I think that was what I liked. So I think purpose in a word for me would be innovation, and then I guess that kind of linked into technology. So I do feel technology is the forefront of you know, everything that we're doing at the moment. And it is an area that there's so much innovation and so much funding in at the moment. So I broke it down that way, and I think it was just a case of being honest with myself, and maybe what got me up in the morning. I think certain lectures, for example, I'd be really interested in, and then some others I just yeah, I think you know when you're not interested. And so yeah, I'd just say be honest with yourself and maybe have a think of it. I think it's something that is definitely coming into the working world, and doing a job now, people are looking to fill their purpose.
That's great, thank you. And sometimes the reality is you don't know your purpose until you're in it, until you're in that job and you find your way, and you get really enthused by something you're doing. So try stuff out. And like you said, Sam, it's about experimenting and trying different things. So great advice there, thank you. I've got a question here for Andy, if that's okay. It says, because psychology and mental health can be very competitive, what advice would you give to psychology students going into their placement year to get the most out of their time? So when they're going for graduate interviews, what advice would you give in terms of making the most of that opportunity?
So I think with psychology, it's just about when you're in the actual placement, like putting yourself out there. So I was very shy when I first started, and I kind of was just there like waiting for someone to tell me what to do. So in the beginning, I did find my placement very hard in that sense, and eventually I just got to the point where I would go to like other support workers or managers and recommend ideas of what I think would be good and stuff like that. And I think that really helped, and eventually they actually got me in contact with a psychologist, and I was able to help with developing an online therapy. So putting yourself out there and kind of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone does really help. And then just in a general sense, you just have to get a lot of voluntary work. So like I just said, I volunteered with Nightline at the university, and I still volunteered with them while I was doing my placement, because my placement was in Manchester. So yeah, that's the main advice I'd give, really.
Great. And are there any skills that you developed during your placement that you're using now in your masters?
Research skills, because as I said, I was speaking with a psychologist, and obviously now I'm doing the honorary assistant psychologist role. So in terms of my confidence, that has helped me so much more. Like, I'm not in that weird phase right now in my placement where I feel like I don't know what to do, because I just talk to people and it's kind of much more easier for me. So that's why so I would say confidence was the main thing for me, because when you're working with clients, that's what you need, really.
Brilliant, that's great, thank you so much. Okay, another question here, this is for everyone on the panel. So if you could give one piece of advice to students who are looking for a placement right now, what would that be? Anyone want to start first?
Research. For like, when you go into an interview, you need to know about that company, you need to know about their values. Like, you can't just give generic statements. Like, you need to show why you will be good working within that company and what they're going to offer you, I would say, is our main advice, really.
That's great, thank you, Andy. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say so I think we've talked a lot today around kind of experience and how it might help you, obtain your placement year. And I think some people think of experience as you need to have, a summer placement or an internship or something like that beforehand. I found my most valuable experience asset when applying was just a job that I'd had. So I was a referee for a number of years, and I really kind of again took the time to consider, how has me being a referee developed my skills, whether it be organization or people management, and I really sort of developed a good answer, I think, around that. And when you come to these applications and when you come to stuff like this, I think it really helps. I'd say that.
Great, that's great advice. Thank you very much, Sam. Anyone else want to go next?
Regarding the rejections, forget them, move on. This is a new opportunity, nothing to do with your last one. Start from fresh, put everything into it. Don't let your past experience put you off in any way.
Great, thank you, Jessica. Imi?
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is, this is just 6 months or a year of your life. And even if it's not the perfect, if you don't end up getting the dream placement and you get something else, there's still so much to learn from it. You can learn, you know, whether you want to be at a big organisation, a little organisation, if you want to live in that specific city that you've had your placement opportunity in, that sort of size company. There's so many things that you'll learn that I think that you take for granted. You know, you learn more than just what the job role is and your day-to-day tasks. There's a lot more that you can take from it too. So I think, you know, don't have too much pressure on yourself for getting this sort of dream opportunity that ticks every box, because you're still learning and you're still super young, and you know, there's so many opportunities ahead of you after this, and it'll help to shape what you choose to do afterwards if you don't enjoy it.
That's great. Again, really great advice. You're such a knowledgeable panel. We're so honoured to have you here today. So thank you so much for that. Okay, I've got another one. Andy mentioned that she was quite shy at the beginning of her placement, but as she got more involved in things, her confidence grew. So this is for the rest of the panel. Could you, if you could go back in your placement year, is there anything you would do differently to maximise the benefits of the experience? So going back to that year, is there anything you do differently? Would you take advantage of something that maybe you said no to, or you weren't confident enough to put your hand up for? Should we start off with you, Jessica, maybe? Is there anything you go back and do differently?
So I've actually been working with 3M for the last 5 years. So I graduated in 2015. So I've seen a few graduates, a few industrial placements come through since then as well. So I did my placement back 2012. So probably lots of things that I would have changed, but actually all a bit of a distant memory. But one thing that I know with the students coming through now that I work with, and because I did the graduate scheme, I would often be first point of call if people have any questions on their placement. And a lot of things that I've seen is coming in with a slight arrogance that you, and now don't get me wrong, you know your subject well and you deserve to be there, and good that you're confident, but actually I think you're going into a room full of experts, and whether that's people, if you're working in manufacturing, people on the shop floor that know the line inside out because they tighten all the screws. Learn from them, learn from everybody. Don't feel like just because you go to university you're maybe better than anyone. I would take everybody's advice, whether it's the cleaner, the CEO, or your colleague or your other graduate. I'd really try to be a bit humble and listen to what other people have to say.
Great, thank you so much, Jessica. Very insightful there. Andy, is there anything you'd go back and change or do differently?
The only thing I can really think of that stuck out for me was what I mentioned before about how shy I was. I just don't wait for everyone to always come to you to be like, you need to do this, because sometimes because you're like added in, you're just doing a placement, sometimes people can kind of forget you're there in a way, and I know it sounds kind of mean, but that can happen. So just, yeah, you just need to keep putting yourself out there and don't get too disheartened if sometimes you feel like your day isn't too productive. Just think, well, what could I recommend to them that I could help with the company and things like that. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. Imi, what about you? Would you go back and change anything? Would you do something differently?
I really liked what Jessica said there about, you know, not being too arrogant. And I think there's a clever way of doing that as well. You can ask people, you know, you can be like, tell me a bit more about the business or expand on that. And you can turn some of these interviews into a bit of an interview for them as well. It's as much an opportunity for you to get information from the person as it is for them to get information from you. The other thing as well to bear in mind, especially if you're going down the startup route, is to try and get a mentor that's a bit older, maybe had a bit of experience in different companies to bounce ideas off of, and ask any questions, and really use that LinkedIn network as well for your advantage. People are more than happy to like hop on a phone call or respond to your emails with ideas and suggestions. And I think it does just sort of help to have that advice and that second person, you know, second pair of ears to listen to any concerns or thoughts that you have. And Manchester Uni actually also have a mentor scheme as well, because I think my mentor came from that as well.
Great, that's fantastic. Thank you for that, Imi. And Sam?
Yeah, so this might change varying on if you're in a corporate setting or maybe a startup setting. But I think one thing that I didn't spend enough time doing was I think I did a lot of personal development while I was on the placement, and was learning, I guess, the skills of marketing. But I didn't do anything super formal. So in Unilever, we have loads of learning opportunities, whether it be courses, conferences, licenses for physical learning. So I would definitely say try do that, and
I think Sam's frozen there. Give him another second to see if he can reconnect. Yeah, you're moving again. We just lost the end of that, Sam, unfortunately. I think there was a bit of a connection issue there.
It was freezing for me, so that's what I expected. But yeah, I think would just be to don't be afraid to keep learning. You're a placement student at the end of the day. If you don't do your job, the company's not going to collapse. And I'm not advocating, slacking off, but I am advocating, investing time in your own development for formal learning and informal learning. So, and again, I think Imogen and Jessica both mentioned networking, and I think that's so important. Try and get yourself a mentor.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a question for everyone on the panel. Can you share one key highlight that happened during your placement year? So something that you're really proud of or excited about, something that you achieved. So Imogen, could we maybe start with you this time?
Yeah, sure. As I said, travel was a huge thing for me, and I was very excited about that. We got to go to, so I started off with my focus on the events industry. So we ended up going to a big trade show in Nashville, and I was involved in the preparation for that, getting all the booklets and things and articles together, sorting out the stand, flights and things, and then getting there and just sort of having the best time. It was so good. Seeing all of our work sort of come together, getting to meet the team because we're quite international. For the longest time, all of my colleagues were in the US and I was the only person in Europe. So it was great to just have that team feel and also do it in Nashville. What better place could you pick? It was great, really good.
Fantastic. Andy, what was your highlights?
So when I was working in the community service, I used to assist on doing cognitive behavioural group sessions, and I was just an assistant, so I do a couple bits of it, but for the most part it was the lead person doing it. And as I said before, my confidence was kind of constantly going up and up and up, and they eventually was like, you're doing really well, we want you to lead one of them by yourself. And they just told me in the morning, so I didn't even have time to fully prepare. But it was such a good experience because I didn't have time to overthink it. I just done it, kind of went through all the session notes, and I got really good feedback. So doing that session by myself while being supervised, obviously there was someone watching, was really good experience. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Sam, your highlights?
Yeah, I think going abroad was always a highlight. So not quite Nashville, but we have a huge office in Rotterdam, and I remember we were there for a week-long workshop, and it was a really productive workshop. But the actual highlight was a bit of an impromptu boat trip. So Rotterdam's built around loads of docks, and it was a sunset boat trip, kind of around the docks, and everyone was drinking and having a good time. And yeah, it was I think a highlight from the respect that I was I'm actually working, but I'm doing it with people who I genuinely believe are good friends and continue to be good friends to this day. So yeah, I think it was a realization of those personal relationships, and work isn't as scary as maybe it first seems when you start.
Yeah, brilliant. Work doesn't always feel like work. That's a great place to be. Okay, and Jessica.
As I mentioned, my placement was back in 2012, so a specific event is not jumping to mind, but I do remember the sense of accomplishment whenever it was your name attached to, no matter how small, but you were the lead in my case, I was the lead engineer on a small project, and that sense of accomplishment, then it's obviously good for your confidence, and yeah, good experience to have.
Brilliant. We're just going to finish off with one final question now, because we're very close to the end of the webinar. What advice would you give in terms of if someone's rejected, if they don't get, you know, their dream job that they're applying for? What advice would you give, or do you want to share how you coped with, you know, being knocked back, being rejected? What would you say to someone now in that position? Does anyone want to?
Oh, sorry. I think don't take it too personally, and ask for feedback, I think, is the best thing, because then you can use that feedback in your next application. But yeah, just don't let it get you down too much. I think someone mentioned before, like when you're doing a new application, that's a new application, don't dwell too much on the past. Obviously you can use the feedback, but yeah, just keep going. Eventually you will secure somewhere. It's very rare someone gets the first placement that they apply for, so yeah.
Thank you, Andy. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Thanks. So I think from my perspective, I think it's a little bit different. But so I had the placement year at Unilever, and one of the, I guess, objectives at the end of that was an automatic place on the graduate program. And you know, even within the placement, the competition for those places was extremely strong. And I remember at the end of the year, you know, with my team and my manager, you know, positive feedback all around. And I remember that calibration process, and I actually didn't secure an automatic place on the graduate program. I obtained the tier less was, you know, it was still a fast track to the assessment center, but there was no guarantee that I'd get that graduate job. And there was someone else who was another placement student, and really lovely guy, but he did not take that rejection very well, and was quite dismissive and quite negative around the company and stuff like that. So I think one thing that maybe helped me stand out against him was not taking that, I guess, rejection personally, and you know, competition is real, and it is something you should be aware of, but it isn't a personal decision, and you can still do extremely well and still have rejection. So I think really try and stay positive, and really take rejection as a lesson of how you can improve the next time. And for me, I think, you know, my takeaways were networking. I don't think I did that effectively enough during my placement outside of my team. And I changed that, and I spent, you know, the last couple of weeks at the company really building up that network and speaking to people and telling them what I'd done. And ultimately that helped me get the graduate placement. So don't take things personally, and really be positive about any type of rejection you get, and really do that self reflection. I think is useful.
Thank you, Sam. Jessica, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if it is rejection because you're not getting through the door, then work on your CV, and whether that is part-time experience in hospitality and retail, something that's maybe not your degree, not related to your degree, still any work experience is good work experience. Volunteering is also good, but also I think having something, I did mention something that you're interested in, something that you're passionate about, if you can throw it in a last line in your CV that's something a bit different, if you've been on a junior Olympic team, or if you like, you know, rock climbing at the weekends, whatever, just something that's personal, maybe it does like help you get through the door. If it's when you're getting as far as interview and then not having any success, then take advantage of the university careers, go to mock interviews. I'm sure you can organise it. Penny, and volunteering you. No, but I'm sure there is something that you can do. Definitely look into that. So really focus on the weakness that's preventing you from getting your placement, but ultimately it's so competitive, and don't take it to heart, because yes, it is hard. But I think Amy also said about you can learn so much from any placement, so maybe don't set your standards too high. If you get something, be willing to try it. You'll learn from it regardless.
Thank you so much. And then finally from Amy.
Yeah, sure. I'd agree with everything everyone said here. I think from a CV perspective, just be careful that you're not just, you know, using your standard CV for everything. You can customize your CV, tweak it for, different roles and things. Again, echo what Jessica just said about the career service and all of the resources you've got at uni. Like this is an opportunity not to pass up on, just using all of those resources that are there. You've got your tutorial guide, the people that guide you in that. I can't think what they're called, seminar people. And then also reaching out to anyone that's from uni. If you find anyone on LinkedIn that's from the University of Manchester, we've all got a soft spot for uni and for Manchester, and I'm sure most people are pretty happy to help and point you in the right direction, or even just telling you how they got into their particular role at that company is something that might be worthwhile. But yeah, don't give up, and pivot. Things don't always work out, and you could get a placement but something could change down the line during the placement. So just being a bit flexible and dynamic and go with it, I think.
Thank you so much. Amazing advice there from everyone. So thank you so much for that. And Imi, you've just sort of segued me nicely to LinkedIn. So all of our panelists are on LinkedIn. They're all happy for you to connect with them. So please take advantage of that. I'm sure if you approach them individually as well, if you've got any further questions, I'm sure they'll be able to help you with that. Tomorrow, just to mention, we have got the employer panel. So this is employers who are offering placement opportunities. So it'll be the same time, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock tomorrow. So please sign up for that via Careers Link. And just want to say a huge thank you to all of our panelists today. You've really been so kind in sharing your experience and give us an insight into your journeys. And I really think it's been really helpful for our audience, and I found it fascinating. So thank you so much again for giving up your time, for sharing that journey with us. And please keep in contact, and as I say, reach out on LinkedIn where you can, and stay connected. Thank you very much. We'll finish the webinar now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Good luck.
Thank you.